Chris Charm for WhereDoesGodzillaPoop.com, and welcome to the first in hopefully a long series of videos that gives a video element to our regular feature that we have on WhereDoesGodzillaPoop.com called This Month in Gaming History. And at the time of recording, we're heading into September, so in this video we're going to look at some games that turned 20 years old in September 2013. And if you look back to September 1993, the one big title that leaps out is this. If you haven't guessed already, it's Gunstar Heroes from Treasure. Now, Treasure had just been founded 1 year prior to Gunstar Heroes coming out. They were formed in 1992, and this was actually their first commercial release, coming out in America on September the 9th, and it came to Japan the next day on September the 10th. And it was actually the first of 2 Treasure releases in September 1993, so right after this we're going to have a look at Treasure's second game. So, if you're not familiar, Gunstar Heroes is a side-scrolling action game that's kind of typical of a lot of sort of arcadey action shooters that were coming to arcades at the time. It's very sort of familiar if you're used to something like Metal Slugs by SNK. It's that similar kind of very challenging, very difficult side-scrolling action, but with a great deal of humor as well. It was very well received at the time, and although it didn't get quite the commercial reception it deserved, it did get quite a strong cult following, and it was very sort of well received critically, which led to it eventually being ported all over the place, to retro collections and online services. You can get this on PSN, you can get this on Xbox Live Arcade at the moment. There was a special PlayStation 2 Treasure Box disc that came out a few years ago in Japan on PS2, which had Gunstar Heroes and a couple of other Treasure games on it. So I mean, it was very well received both in Japan and in America. It's also got the distinction of being reviewed in the first episode of Edge magazine to the British viewers. Edge also celebrating 20 years old 20 years of age in September of 1993. But Edge being Edge kind of gave it the one sort of dissenting, middling review. They gave it 6 out of 10 at the time, and they kind of complained that there wasn't perhaps quite as much of the experiences as they'd like. So yeah, I mean the deal is you're running and gunning through these really lush, really vibrant environments. You can, as you can see, once you get up close to an enemy, you can engage in some close quarters combat by decking people and giving them a throw across the screen. And you have that very arcade style prompt, and straight away you're into a boss fight. I'm going to reveal really how terrible I am at this kind of game in this video, so the idea isn't to show perfect gameplay here. It's just to give a very, very sort of quick 10-minute look at what the game was like. So you can grab up to 2 different types of weapons. As you can see here, I started off with my rapid shot, and then I just collected that green arrow power. And I can use the A button to sort of, pick between the 2. But they also each behave differently with the others, so they both kind of combine with themselves. So there's 4 different types of weapons, but they combined in their own separate ways, making basically up to 8 different sort of combinations or formulas or whatever. So yeah, I mean, it just kind of sums up everything that was good on the Mega Drive or Genesis if you're an American disposition. Really, really bright. It's got that, even though this isn't a Sega produced game, it's got that Sega bright blue sky, and just a really bright, colorful game, a great sense of fun to everything, and just a lot of character even to the enemies you're fighting. You see them cowardly running, taking their jetpacks away from me here. Just you know, an awful lot of character, and it shows that kind of humor that stays with Treasure games even to this day. But certainly, you know, when it comes to games like Bankai-O and things like that, you know, I mean, the hallmarks of Treasure is you know, very, very challenging games, but also games that are an awful lot of fun and funny too. Let's see if we can at least get to the first stage. As I said, full disclosure, I also haven't played the game. I haven't played Gunstar Heroes in at least about 5 years, I think, so this is not me showing textbook gameplay. And I love just like the names of the bosses, Bravu Man, and you get their descriptions of their special attacks. And this kind of, you know, pseudo 3D effect, you know, with the sprites here, that really, really looks gorgeous. And it was kind of beyond most of what was coming out on the Mega Drive at the time. And certainly beyond some of the more cynical games that were coming out in September '93, which we also might have a look at a little bit later on. And again, this sort of dynamic, almost sort of cinematic style thing of sort of telling this gameplay of things going wrong and suddenly, you know, flying into this, having destroyed the boss, being sent skidding down the edge of this pyramid where I'm absolutely getting hammered, I'm afraid. Well, this guy dying. Thank you. You know, I mean, it's something, you know, this sort of telling a story through gameplay, this sort of mechanic is something that's really beyond its you know, beyond its or advanced for its time, I should say. Everything kind of flows together. It's just super dynamic, for want of a better word. Everything, it just flows. It's just so consistent, so well designed. This little interaction. Here comes Pinky Rhoda. So the only tricky thing is you're sort of dying for a, you know, the freedom of being able to aim with a second stick, because trying to aim with the same D-pad that you're running with is a big challenge. Very used to me, because I laughingly encountered. I'm sure there'll be video comments informing you of just that fact, so thanks in advance. No, I can't remember. Do you continue? You continue all the way back there. So unfortunately, I'm not going to get to the end of Stage 1 of Gunstar Heroes before my self-imposed mandatory 10-minute time limit, I'm afraid. But yeah, Gunstar Heroes coming out right at the start of September 1993, and probably the pick of that month. It's a fantastic game. Wait forever for a Treasure game, and then all of a sudden two of them show up in the same month. This is the second offering from Treasure, and the second from September of '93. McDonald's Treasureland Adventure. Quite how Treasure got the McDonald's license, or were saddled with the McDonald's license, I'm not exactly sure, but you know, that's what happens. McDonald's actually a fairly long history in video games, goes back to McDonald Land, I guess, on the NES, and actually stretches all the way up to a really obscure McDonald's licensed promotional version of Parappa the Rapid 2 in Japan, at least on the PS2. But yeah, this comes from Treasure, and you kind of wonder, as Ronald gives his sort of creepy little bit of dialogue over here. Oh no, bad guys. Yeah, I mean, it kind of seems, given how the game plays, as we'll get into it, and just given the general look, how the fact that really Ronald here is the only McDonald's-inspired element of the design. There's no, I don't know, hamburglers about, there's no collecting of golden arches or things like that. And even if you look at the title of the game in general, Treasureland, it kind of seems that this was something that was really already made and then had the McDonald's label tacked onto it. So it's a platform game. Ronnie can jump, he can shoot magic, fairy dust. Maybe you could say it's the flour that they use, I don't know, to make burgers or whatever. And he's also got a stretchy scarf. You can stretch his scarf up to grab onto things, as I'm using here in the background. There we go. And that's kind of very similar to another Treasure game, Dynamite Heady, which I'm sure we'll get onto at some point if we keep making these videos. And yeah, I mean, Adva games being terrible, poisonous things, you kind of expect this to be a terrible, poisonous game. But yeah, it's really not bad. It's cheery, it's fun. There's big things that happen, like that levels crashing in from nowhere. It's something I'm obviously terrible at. Okay, let's concentrate a little bit. It's a decent variety of moving left to right and up to down and climbing really evil, sinister trees. What that was just like. Wow, what's going on here? Lots of platform games from this kind of era wanted to really show off. Wow. Wanted to really show off parallax scrolling, and that was the gimmick of the era, I think. But you know, much like later on, you'd have cel shading, you'd have lens flare, and in the 2D era, it was how many layers of parallax could you pull off, which is like the effect where different parts of the foreground and background scroll at different speeds, so it kind of gives the illusion of depth to a scene. But yeah, I mean, the flaw of that was too many developers kind of showing what we can do with our foreign backgrounds, and then you would have backgrounds that were so distracting that you couldn't see what was happening in the actual playfield. Just like I can't see what's happening here as I'm jumping from thing to thing, and I've fallen down, and this really isn't just a McDonald's in Treasureland thing. This was kind of symptomatic of a lot of things in the era. It's look at our tech rather than look how good the game is. I'm doing really badly. I have no idea what G is. Gold? Yeah, collecting gold? Yeah, so I mean, yeah, you just think, given that this is by Treasure, this is called Treasureland, this was probably going to be Treasure's first game, perhaps, and then it kind of got pushed back to incorporate McDonald's, and then Gunstar Heroes came out in the meantime, quite possibly. This is a little bit of pseudo 3D there with the platforms coming down, but I've got to jump up. This is terrible. crap. But yeah, perhaps nothing really to the technical marvel that Gunstar Heroes was over in a month. Let's see if I can do it this time. If not, we'll move on. Oh, come on. Could at least go a little bit faster. Ah, yeah. Bugger. Okay, well, I think we've seen enough from McDonald's in Treasureland. Certainly not up to the level of Gunstar Heroes from before, but, you know, a fairly decent title for a cynical advertising game. Not bad. We've been fairly Sega-focused so far, but here's something multi-format. Bram Stoker's Dracula, based on the 1992 movie a year later, being made on pretty much every 16-bit format at the time. This isn't really, you know, the scope of this video isn't really just to laugh at bad 16-bit games, and this is very much a bad 16-bit game. But there is some interesting things to talk about with it. This is published by Sony ImageSoft, and Sony, pretty much a year to this exact time, were working with Nintendo on what was then the Nintendo PlayStation, the CD add-on to the Super Famicom. And out of a financial dispute, Nintendo went and jumped into bed very suddenly with Philips, which was a disaster in and of itself, and we'll talk about that another time. So what this meant was that Sony were kind of feeling spurned, and Sony set up Sony Computer Entertainment in Japan to start working on what was now the very much Sony PlayStation. And in the West, they had Sony ImageSoft, which was kind of an attempt for them to dip their toes into the publishing waters of games at the time, which led to a few different companies, in this case Psygnosis, who Sony had just recently bought, to work on, you know, various different properties, including a lot of different Sony, you know, licensed products that were Sony-owned movies. So yeah, so there's one interesting story that I kind of like about this. It's quite possibly apocryphal, but there was a whole bunch of Sony published licensed efforts coming out at the same time. I think this and Last Action Hero, and I think Cliffhanger as well. And I think out of the three, this Dracula was probably the best, but that's really not saying very much at all. And they were all reviewed in Amiga Power in the UK at exactly the same time, and they were given this big sort of triple feature kind of faux review thing. And as said, there's this kind of quite possibly apocryphal story of a Sony rep phoning into Amiga Power after that episode was just about ready to go out. And I think it was Stuart Campbell that answered the phone, and the rep asked, well, how did we do in the reviews this month? And Stuart riffles through the magazine and he says, well, let's see, you got 23%. And the Sony guys goes, wow, that blimey, that's a bit stiff. Which one's that for? And then Stuart goes, well, that's for all of them put together. And that's when the telephone conversation ended. So yeah, whether or not that's true, I do quite enjoy that story. Oh god, I've just been killed by a rat. Just 'cause I'm not paying attention. I'm playing on easy as well. Where did he come from? So Psygnosis already at this time have a really big reputation for making stylish games with very little to no substance. Really, most famously, something like the Shadow of the Beast series, 1, 2, and 3. First couple being pretty but largely terrible games, and Shadow of the Beast 3 not being too bad, but kind of very easily ignored. And yeah, this this doesn't really even have the benefit of being particularly attractive. You've got some parallax scrolling, but I think just look at how this spear-wielding guy is walking along. Look at that ugly spider, you know, and then compare it to Guardian Heroes, which we were looking at earlier on, and yeah, I mean, you really kind of think this doesn't even have looks going for it. It's full of these sort of sudden death things. Spikes coming in from the floor, and just really, oh god, should pay at least some attention to this game, at least some service. But yeah, I mean, it's crikey, I'm terrible at this game. I think that's more my fault than the fault of the software at hand. I did play this once before and got a good bit further. But yeah, I mean, the sharp edges on everything on all of these platforms and things like that. This doesn't even have sort of technical mastery going for it in any real way, and it's certainly not, you know, creative in any sense. I think at this point, even at this point in '93, I think most people were done with, well, here's a movie license game, let's make it a side-scrolling platformer where, you know, you're kind of just fighting spiders and things, you know, that don't really have any connection to the movie. Here's a boss down here. Finished. You hit him enough times, he blows up, which is another thing. Yeah, sure. I'm sure that guy with the whip was in the movie. I don't think I ever saw all of Bram Stoker's Dracula in one sitting, but I'm sure this is perfectly faithful. And here we are again in another background fighting dinosaur skeletons. Really? Does this in any way make sense? Again, being killed by mice. Yeah, this isn't dismal. It does work, but it's just, yeah, I mean, it's the epitome of really uncreative, really sort of cynical licensed product that was the bane of most people's existence at this point in '93. Yeah, not too great. Heading back to Sega Land for our next game here today, and Sonic CD, which Sega put out for the Sega Mega CD in Japan right at the end of September in '93. I think the European, the American versions followed in the next couple of months. This is a game that has a lot of fans. I think people who are fans of 2D Sonic games as opposed to the 3D ones will kind of hold this above the rest and say that this is the best Sonic game that there is. Perhaps Sega certainly disagreed, being as how they didn't really port it to other systems or include it in any of their retro collections going forward, really until the recent XBLA and PSN versions that came out. And for the sake of just convenience of capture, we're looking at the iOS port here. So be forewarned, it is actually a pretty good port, but I dare say, you know, the technically eyed will be able to figure out that there's a couple of things missing, and, you know, they'll be overlaid D-pads and buttons, but that's not really what we're set to look at here. So yeah, lots of people, as I said, really hold this up as the best Sonic game. I think there's something to that. I think it's probably the most Sonic of Sonic games. I think it exemplifies what Sonic was in the 2D era more than other Sonic games. But whether or not that's a good thing, well, yeah, I really don't like Sonic very much. I certainly hate the 3D games, as it is fashionable to do. But really was never ever a big fan of 2D Sonic either. I think it's all about moments like what just happened to me there. It's all about, rather than maintaining speed, which in itself is kind of, you know, style over substance and flash over trousers. It's Sonic always seems to me to be constantly about building momentum and then sticking you in front, sticking an obstacle right in your path and screwing you up. And that, you know, I never understood the appeal of that. I think go one way or the other. Either have good sort of Mario-style platforming or have really, really fast running. But the two together never really seem to align. And I think it's only recently with these, you know, with the episodes that came out over the last couple of years, I think other people have started to catch on to the idea that, you know, maybe Sonic was never that great of a thing altogether at all, you know. So the gimmick with Sonic CD is that you can travel back and forth through time. As I just finished a past gate there and then started running fast enough, I've been transported to the past. There is some plot-based reason for this. I'm not exactly sure what a plot-based reason is. It certainly wasn't given away in that little cartoon intro there. And yeah, apart from this, it's also got a few things that take advantage of what you know, what the Sega CD could do. As you saw a little bit earlier on, the screen was kind of turning perpendicular to give a sort of pseudo 3D view of what was happening. And there's also, I don't know whether it will be good enough in any sense to make it to the sort of Chaos Emerald bonus stages. But you know, those bonus stages here were pseudo Mode 7 style, behind Sonic, running things. It's like, why is that rock there? You know, that's just daft, right? There's no satisfying, just little things I think that get to me with Sonic. It's like, why break your momentum right at the end? Somebody had to think, I'll put a rock there, you know? It just, I don't know. And part of, I think particularly Sonic CD, parts of it, like this, look really garish and really ugly. And we were talking before about how it was fashionable at the time to have as many layers of parallax as was possible. And, you know, how sometimes that kind of got in the way of actual gameplay. And, yeah, I think Sonic CD kind of falls into that trap. Ah, yeah, bugger. There we go. Gosh, it didn't take too long. What is good about Sonic CD is the soundtrack, and it's the source of kind of constant debate, well, amongst certain particular hardcore Sonic fans over whether the Japanese soundtrack or the American soundtrack was better in Sonic CD. I favour the Japanese one, which is what we're listening to now. And yeah, this stage, which is great. This stage, which is, I guess, kind of a take of the old Vegas Night stage in the original games. I went too fast, right? Scripted thing. This was let next Sonic take Amy. Great. Yeah, this stage really exemplifies to me everything that's wrong with what Sonic is. Perhaps I'm not going to be able to show it to you because I'm too busy traveling into the future. I'm gonna talk about how unenjoyable Sonic CD is. Well, that was my intent, and then I'll eventually wind up having fun and then have to unconvincingly lying about it. But you know, yes, you know, it's this. It's, well, this is flashy, but I'm not doing anything, but fine. But then it's gonna shoot me out into those spikes, you know, with little chance to avoid it. Perhaps I'm crap. I freely admit that I think I freely admitted in every single game that we've looked at in this video that I'm not the best at stuff. But it's why somebody had to think, we'll put a spring in there to kill your momentum and send you back the other way. And what was the logic there? Who thought that it was fun? It just, I never understood the thought process behind Sonic level design. I've never understood the appeal of bits like this, where you're just like bouncing over and over again. It's yeah, it's weird. Lots of people like it. Lots of people like this. So please, you know, feel free to ignore me and don't take my word for it. But yeah, I never understood the appeal of Sonic CD and Sonic in general, to be honest. But we've spent far too long playing games on the Mega Drive today. A big month in September for Mega Drive titles between the two Treasure games and Sonic CD. So why not? Why don't we take a look at something a little bit different? So it's onto the Amiga for the last game of today, and back to Psygnosis, but this one not developed by Psygnosis, but published by them, and actually made by Scott Johnston, who was working at DMA Design at the time, who, well, I guess now you might know them better as Rockstar North. So this is Hired Guns, which, as you can see here, actually was quite a beast on the Amiga 500. It took a long time to get going. It was delayed an awful lot, and actually took advantage of having 2 megabytes on a system that most people had 1 megabyte at the time, to offer extra special sound effects. Actually, the 5th disc on this, and there were 5 floppy disks, which is why we've got plenty of time to talk as this thing loads up. It was just a sound pack for the rest of the game. So Hired Guns is an interesting one. It's kind of before the first-person shooter genre existed, a 4-player co-op squad-based first-person shooter. Maybe that's a bit of a generous way to look at it, but it's the way I like to look at it anyway. So you can see there, yeah, it benefits from extra sound effects if that's what you have, you know. Actually, this was I think just made for the Amiga 500. There was like a souped-up version for the A1200, but that never came out. And actually, there was apparently, if you dig around the corners and rumors of the internet, a sequel that had been made and completed but never saw the light of day. Start a game here. As you can see, there's some training and oddly full campaign or short action game. I'm jumping into a full campaign here, and you can see there's up to 4 players. This was all played with the mouse, and it was actually designed, as you'll see, it's all in split screens. It was actually designed to be played with 4 mice. You know, 4 people gathering around with 4 mice, which is pretty unique. I can't really think of many other games that are like that. So you build up a party here, or you choose your party from this list of well, suitably cool cyberpunky people, suitably cool for 1993 anyway. It's good, I think, to have a mix of robots and humans and sort of assault and support classes. This game has permadeath, as we'll see, and basically you have this whole long campaign and you've got to get all 4 people through everything. If one of your party dies, well then tough, you've only got 3 people for the next mission and so on. So this game is really, really tough. I guess seeing as it's taking an age to load directly from the old school floppies here, let's talk a little bit about where the Amiga was at this point. Actually, earlier in September of 1993, Commodore kind of took advantage of the Amiga being at the peak of its popularity in Europe and brought out a CD console, the Amiga CD32, which was actually a consoleized version of the Amiga 1200, which was, I guess, their flagship computer at the time. And in actual fact, that CD32, you could then convert back if you had more money than sense. You could add a keyboard onto it and a floppy drive, and it would just be an Amiga 1200 computer. But they were going after the kind of Sega Mega CD market. The Mega CD had been about for about a year. And I remember there was a very hubristic advert that billboard that they put up right opposite Sega's Europe offices in the UK, saying, "To be this good takes Sega ages." Little knowing that Commodore themselves would be bankrupt within the year. The CD32 was a terribly cheaply produced thing and didn't really have any games that really took advantage of the CD format. Most of them were Amiga ports. They were just the Amiga 1200 versions of games with rendered intros slapped on the front. And although it did kind of okay, it did a few thousand units in Europe, and particularly in the UK where the Amiga was still fairly popular. It never took off anywhere else, and it quickly sank without trace. And yeah, as I said, Commodore were in dire straits in general at this point, and but only had about a year left in their lives before the whole place went under. And part of not really capturing people's imagination was the fact that good Amiga games were still coming out on regular hardware, like Hired Guns, and this was something that never came across to the CD32, even though at the time, as we'll see, it probably shows its age more than a little bit now, but at the time it was, it was quite something to behold and very different. Yep, this is a bit of floppy disk loading at its finest there, and here we go in the game. Something, as I spin around here, I don't look exactly slick, but at the time this was pretty cool. You see you've got 4 windows here, each representing the 4 characters. And while I said this was really kind of a, as I'm equipping my guys here, they start off with no weapons in their hands, but each person has a different inventory. As I said, really at the start, hey, this is a co-op first-person shooter. It's not really so much that. You can see in terms of style, it's taking a lot from Aliens in its architecture and in its character design and things like that. In terms of gameplay, actually, this is closer to the sort of first-person adventure games that were already around at the time. Things like Captive or Eye of the Beholder, Dungeon Master, things like that. Everything's tile-based, and you can sort of rotate yourself around and move forward in steps by moving your mouse around the corners of the screen. And if you drop down towards the middle and click, you'll shoot. But there's no aiming per se, you just shoot kind of straight in front, and there's dice rolls going on in the background that kind of determine whether you hit stuff. So it's fairly easily, especially when you're, so I'll take care of him, especially when you're playing in just a small window here, it's fairly easy to accidentally fire and waste some of your ammo. You can see really, as I say, ideally you're supposed to be playing this in 4-player, and I do like the little text that runs across the middle of the screen with dialogue. It's just a nice incidental detail, although it often repeats. Ideally you're supposed to be playing this game with 4 people. If you're playing it with 1 person, though, you still have to get everybody to the exit of each stage for the level to finish. So it can be a little bit irritating where really 1 person's supposed to support the other person or the other 3, but what actually happens in practice is, as I'm doing here, I'm moving my 1 droid up towards the exit, and then sort of shifting everybody else up in turn. So this is a little sort of secret. Actually, the maps are reasonably large. Even this map, there's other buildings apart from this with other secrets to find and such. But this is a little sort of sidetrack for extra ammo and some grenades here. If I hit this button, it's going to release this guy, but I can take care of him fairly quickly. There we go. So there's this, it's interface-wise not the easiest. Whenever you see something, you have to go into your inventory to pick it up, and then if it's not something you want right now, you've got to put it into your, I don't know, robotic backpack, I suppose, and then make sure that you put a gun back into your hands. Actually, I played this a couple of times to try and get a video of it, and a couple of times in the past I've died simply because well, I don't need this key right now, because it automatically uses keys if they're in your inventory, and forgot to put a gun into your hands. Whoops, that was a mistake there. And as you can see, the exit's nice and close, but so close and yet so far. So, around the corner, take care of him. And yeah, I mean, and a moving platform kind of here, adding some verticality, a little bit of verticality to the levels. It's easy to kind of look at this and kind of go, well, you know, it certainly looks trashy now, but and it really does show its age, for sure. But this left really quite a mark on me at the time when it came out. I was kind of only 10, and there's a sort of, it's very, very quiet. The only sort of communication between your squad mates is that text scroll in the middle. These are very sort of eerie alien lands, and exploring these and then suddenly coming across, you know, hordes of terrifying monsters. It's really kind of, it was really kind of cool at the time. It's hard to overstate that. Now when I'm gonna open this door here, I know for a fact there are 3 or 4 beasties, so I'm gonna first repair myself and then get my grenades ready, because I'm gonna take care of all of them in one go. That's the plan. Here we go. Whoops. Well, that worked in theory. But yeah, I suppose you could look at it as you know, playing with a single player. It's like you've got 4 lives to get through each stage. The only thing now is that I've completely bollocks myself for the next stage, because that character that's dead is never coming back, and I can't choose from somebody else to replace him. So basically I'm screwed, you know, for the next stage. This is an incredibly punishingly difficult game, and I forgot to put a gun in his hand. Quick. Too late. This is all going to pot, I think. Yeah, it's yeah, I'll make sure I don't make that mistake again. It's relentlessly a really difficult game is Hired Guns, just simply because of the permadeath aspect to it. I can't really remember what the short action games were like, but I imagine it was more of a stage-based kind of approach, where perhaps you didn't have to worry so much about your entire crew dying. So it looks like I've got this, and oh no, I forgot to put a gun back in my hand. The inventory. It's all on you now. This is the first level of the game, by the way. I did finish this. Actually, I did finish this stage before, honestly, and I recorded it as well, and I accidentally deleted it before I could put it up. And that was not too clever, was it? But that's Hired Guns in a nutshell. And I think that's it for September 1993. So do leave your feedback if you found this feature interesting. The plan is just to look at 4 or 5 games that were significant in a month going forward. But there's plenty more to talk about in 1993 and in general in September in history, going back and forth from now on. So do keep tuned to wheredoesgodzillapoop.com. We have a monthly feature that goes out on or around the 1st of every month, but this month in gaming history, and this coming month being September, we'll be looking at September 2003, 1993, and 1983 as well. So plenty to look forward to. Do please check that out.